Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Beer Talkers, the podcast where we bring you news and views on the world of beer and brewing. I'm Sam Hill.
And I'm Sophie Atherton. Together we are the Beer Talkers, and for this episode we're talking hops, the little flowers which add flavour to most beer.
You can think of them as the herbs and spices of beer, bringing all sorts of different flavours and aromas to our favourite brews.
But like many of the topics we cover on the Beer Talkers, they are not entirely without controversy. So as well as looking at the plants, how they grow and how they're preserved, and how we use them in beer, we'll also look at the face-off between British hops and the currently fashionable so-called big flavour hops from the United States and the Southern Hemisphere.
And I'll be sharing my thoughts on Kent Green Hop Beers, the seasonal brews made for the county's Green Hop Beer Fortnight, which I went to the launch of a few weeks ago.
And we'll also be tasting two quite readily available beers that, if you haven't tried them before, or even if you have, are really great brews for showing just what hops taste like in beer and what flavours and aromas they bring.
Yes, we've got a classic American beer for you, one you can easily pick up in the supermarket, and one stalwart of British brewing that's also readily available for your drinking pleasure.
Yes, I am salivating at the thought of those. Stay tuned to find out which beers we've chosen to show off the power of hops. But before we talk hops, we're introducing a new section of the show, partly in response to feedback from you, beer listeners.
That's right. Quite a few of you have said you'd like us to review more beers on the show, so we had to think about that and decided that getting too tanked up in the studio might be a bit of a problem. But we could talk a bit about the beers we've been enjoying between episodes and also tell you a bit about the various beery happenings that we've come across.
We haven't come up with a natty name for the slot just yet, but this episode you can think of it as Sam and Soph's Beery Roundup.
So where to begin? Because we have been off air for quite a while, haven't we?
We have, and that's because we've both been pretty busy. And for example, the day after we recorded our GBBF show, I was back at Olympia for a day's filming with a sort of corporate digital film company doing tastings for St Austell and Thwaites and Shepherd Neame, and also a big sort of interview with Julian Grocock of Seba. One of the first times I've done sort of any formal presenting. I've done filming and telly before, but actually being the presenter of something is bloody hard work. But I did get to actually drink the beer, unlike some presenters when I go on things. I got to taste the beer for real, which was lots of fun. And I did some tastings with Harvey's as well, the Sussex brewery, and they had nice. It was there was a Russian Imperial Stout that they broke out for me, and it was very tasty. So I went straight from our busy day recording to a busy day of filming, and it didn't get any less busy after that. How about you, Sam?
Well, I've been all around the world so since we last saw each other, tasting beer and tasting some quality beer closer to home as well. I visited the Brussels Beer Festival, which is a pretty exciting place to go if you ever fancy a boozy weekend away. I tasted some interesting French beers in Lyon.
That sounds tasty, but I'm intrigued to hear about the French beers. Can you remember much detail about them?
I'm afraid I can't. I was in Lyon for a business and non-beery business, and I visited a fantastic pub there called Palais de la Bière. Really, the emphasis in Lyon is mostly on wine, so a bar specifically for beer is actually a real treat to come across. I'll put some of the beers I tried in the show notes, actually, because I probably mess up the pronunciation more than anything else. But I would definitely recommend going to this bar. I've never been having to wait so long for the number of free samples that he was giving out to another table before he got round to serving us. But he was basically giving a sample of every beer on tap there. But he's got a bit of a fight on his hands at that bar, being where it is in the middle of France, in the middle of so many wine regions. But he's really fighting the good fight.
And what's it called again?
Palais de la Bière.
Oh, well, if I'm ever out that way. Palace of Beer, if I'm ever out that way, I should look that place up.
Oh, yeah, it's really good.
So part of the other things that I've been doing was the PR for Kent Green Hop Beer Fortnight, which is one of the reasons that later in the show Sam will be doing the sampling of the beers and giving his opinion, because I've been paid for a few months to promote them and I don't want to come across as biased. that was a lot of fun. And we had a trade session where we had some journalists and bloggers come down to the Foundry Brew Pub in Canterbury, which was a nice event. So that was one of the things that kept me busy. And I've also been involved in some work around the Sainsbury's Great British Beer Hunt. I was asked to do some radio interviews in support of that. So I spent a day talking about beer on local radio stations up and down the country, which was actually torture because I talked about beer all day and wasn't allowed to drink it.
Oh no!
It was very bad. So once I'd finished, I took myself off to the Craft Beer Co. in I think it's in Leather Lane, isn't it? And I'd not actually been there before. It was my first trip, and I spent a very pleasant afternoon in there just quaffing beers and eating a Scotch egg, which was very tasty and just very relaxing. I had a nice gooseberry sour.
Wow.
And yeah, it was very nice. Didn't knock my socks off in the way something else did that I'll tell you about in a moment, but it was very nice, and now I can't remember who brewed it. which is good. I think it was Red Willow Brewery.
Oh, okay. Well, they make some interesting beer, don't they?
Yeah, they do. So that was nice, and I just had a very relaxing afternoon. And then later, I was judging the Great British Beer Hunt. So they, for those of you who haven't come across it, Sainsbury's, they hold a number of regional heats with breweries, and then 20 beers are selected from all the entrants, and then they're sold in stores for a month, and the 12 which sell best then go into the final and are judged by a bunch of beer writers and beer experts and industry experts, and I've been on that panel judging for the last sort of 2 or 3 years. And the thing that's odd about it is it's not blind tasting. You've got the bottle in front of you, and I think Sainsbury's are thinking about changing that because we always complain about it. But anyway, I don't want to be negative about them because I think it's a cool thing that they do to put beers from all these different breweries that you might not get a chance to taste.
It's an amazing opportunity for the small breweries as well, isn't it, to get their names out there?
Yes, I think it is, but I think it only works really for if you're geared up to be able to produce large numbers. And they had some regional winners for breweries that were less able to do that. But a couple of beers that didn't make it through to the final were one of the Williams Brothers beers, which was called Gonny No Brew That. That's a rubbish Scottish accent, wasn't it? Gonny No Brew That, which was a very zesty sort of pale ale IPA-like beer with lots of sort of foreign hops in, but I really liked it and drank a lot of that. But it didn't make it to the final, and I wonder whether it partly didn't make it through because it had a really rubbish label. Yeah. It was, I don't know, did you see it? Did you see that one? No. Well, you might have seen it and not noticed. And also Hard Knots Infrared was in there but didn't make it through to the final, and I think that maybe people are put off buying 330 mils bottles of beer because they think they're not getting value or something. So
is that a slightly stronger beer from Hard Knot?
I can't remember what its ABV is, but I think it's sort of 6% or above.
Right.
So yes, and that brewery tends to, they tend to do their beers in smaller bottles. But anyway, Sainsbury's Great British Beer Hunt, it was a lot of fun. And the beer that won was Bateman's Bebock. And I expected it to be the Black Pepper Ale that they also entered that won, because they won last year with their Mocha beer. And I think they've hit on the formula, which is to kind of enter something that's a bit wacky and memorable. Not to say that they're not good brewers. I spent a nice post-competition drinking session in the Rake with Jacqueline Bateman and other people. So she's a nice lady. What else have you been up to, Sam?
Well, I mean, apart from all these fun trips abroad, I just wanted to mention a couple of other beers which I've had, which have been really excellent. My brother treated me to a few which he brought down from a beer shop in York. And one was he reintroduced me to the now quite famous Earl Grey IPA from Marble, which we first tasted at the Beer Bloggers Conference back last year in Leeds. And I've got to say, it still doesn't disappoint. It's a fantastic beer. If anything, I think they can leave the tea bags in a little bit longer, but it's
leave the bag in, mate.
Yeah, it's powerful, but without being overbearing. So I really enjoyed that again. So yeah, it's.
I think another beer that I have been giving another try was something else I was doing. Is I was invited to the CAMRA Awards lunch, where they give all the awards to the brewers who won Champion Beer of Britain and other categories in that competition, and they serve all the winning beers there. And one of the I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong now, even though I've been told how to pronounce it. The Fine Ales Jarl was being served, and that's such a good beer. I know we did it for the GBBF programme, but that was such a lovely beer, and it was held in Burton, this awards lunch. At the National Brewery Centre, and they had a team of local CAMRA people doing the cellaring and looking after the beer. And I have to say that it was some of the best kept cask ale I've ever had. Wow. It was so fresh and so lively, and just really not lively in a bad way. I mean, just just felt really fresh and just exactly what you'd want from cask ale. And it's from the same team that manages the local CAMRA beer festival up in Burton-on-Trent. So that was very exciting. And then, but it did make it a little bit difficult for me the next day, because I went to Indie Man Beer Con. Or the Independent Manchester Beer Convention, which everybody in the beer world goes on and on and on about. This amazing festival, you must go. How could you miss it? And I did miss it last year, and I nearly missed it this year as well. But I managed to nip up to Manchester as I was sort of already in the Midlands. I hopped up, but I'd had quite a lot of very nice cask ale the day before, so I was a little bit jaded. But I had many nice beers while I was there. I wrote about this on my own blog. I did feel a bit sort of actually tired by the fact that lots of the beers were really high ABV, and if you didn't really fancy that, especially not on a sort of a Sunday morning, that made me just sort of go, actually, there's a place for some just kind of, 4% session beers here. But if you've never been, it's worth going. It takes place each October in the Victoria Baths in Manchester, which is a former sort of Edwardian swimming baths, and the building is amazing, and all the changing rooms are still in place, and there's all this lovely sort of stained glass windows and stuff, and each room of the festival, each bar area, is actually in the swimming bath.
Wow.
The water isn't in there anymore. Because people would drown.
It would make for a pretty messy beer festival, wouldn't it?
It would. But it was it's worth going to. It's a long way to travel if you're not local to Manchester, I think, because it's a lot of the sort of usual suspects. It's beers from Thornbridge. There's a Magic Rock bar. There's lots of Marble beers are on, and just the breweries that probably people think of as the British craft breweries are what was on offer. But my two beers of the festival were I had some beer from Pig and Porter, who are pals of mine. That's my disclaimer. They're a sort of an artisan events catering business, and part of which is to brew beers.
Well, that's a really nice catering business.
Yeah. Well, the food half is amazing, and best pulled pork I've ever had. And the brewer is a guy called Sean Ayling, and he is a very talented and creative guy. And I got round to trying some of his Red Spider rye, which was in keg for this festival, and that was very tasty. It's got some caramel backbone to it, but it's got those really big, powerful, zesty hops, kind of grapefruity flavours in it, and that was really nice. It would have been probably my beer of the festival had I not had a sour porter from Buxton Brewery.
That sounds fascinating. Tell me more.
Well, I went up to the bar and I was tired of, American IPAs, American pale ales. And I went up to the guy and I said, I want something different. And he offered me some American IPAs and some American pale ales. And I went, no, I mean something different from that. I said, I want something different. And he went, what about a sour porter? I went, yeah, go on, I'll give that a go. And I had a little taste and I thought, right, okay, this is something different. So I bought a third and off I went. And I went off into one of these little booths at the side of their former changing rooms at the side of the baths and sat down to have this. And it was amazing. It was like little explosions of red currants and raspberries going off inside your mouth. But before you got to that, you'd got the sort of like coffee-like chocolate flavours that you'd expect from a porter. But they were all kind of subdued by these berry explosions. Wow. And the red currant flavours just took me back to being a kid, because we had red currant bushes at the bottom of our garden, and my brother and I used to go and steal all the berries off there and eat them. My mum thought they were being pinched by the birds, and she used to put net curtains over them to protect them, but really it was us nicking these berries. And it made me think of that, because it was like a red currant explosion that just kept going off in your mouth. And I wanted it to run over every part of my tongue. And as the beer warmed up a little bit, it was a keg beer, as it warmed up a little bit, then the kind of coffee flavours and the more traditional porter flavours sort of became apparent as well. But it was an amazing beer. And I probably could have sat there and drunk it all day. I didn't want it to end. So that was, Buxton, it's called, I won't be able to remember what it's called. I will tell you and put it on the show notes.
Okay, great.
Isn't that awful? It's got Wharf in the name. But anyway, it's Buxton Brewery and it's their sour porter. Don't laugh.
Well, sorry.
It's happened to us all. So you didn't say much about the Brussels Beer Festival, actually, Sam. How was that? I bet that was a treat.
It's an experience. It's certainly one that I think you have to try once. So most beer festivals in the UK are indoors or undercover. They're usually in big halls somewhere, and you have all the beer on the outside of the hall, and everyone stands in the middle, listens to music, all that kind of thing. But in Brussels, they do it slightly differently. It's in the main square, so the Grand Place. You're surrounded by amazing historic buildings, and all the beer is in the middle, and then you're penned in around the outside of the stalls serving the beer. You have to fight your way around the outside, whilst there are various jazz bands and things and marching bands going round and round the square.
I hope the beer's good, because it sounds like a nightmare so far.
Well, the beer is fantastic, and each brewery each of the larger breweries are represented there, and they send their own staff, so the beer is served exactly how they would like to serve it. They're each served in their own glasses, which is a real pain because if you have a beer from one stall, you then have to take your glass back to the same stall. So each journey is twice as tough as it should be. But I've got to say, some of the beers are phenomenal, and we got to taste some of our favourite beers again, one of which is the aged pale from, I want to say Bavik, which is a fantastic beer and made famous actually by Michael Jackson, the beer writer, and he was the one who encouraged the brewers to actually sell it commercially, because before it was just used as an ingredient in their other sour beers. And the other beer I got to try, which I love tasting every year, is the Duvel Triple Hop, which they change the hop each year. Last year it was Citra, which made for a very interesting beer. So it's a normal Duvel beefed up a bit in ABV and then dry hopped with a particular hop. And this year it was one of your favourites, Soph. It was the Sriracha Ace, and that. So I really recommend, if you can find the triple hop Sriracha Ace from Duvel, it's a fantastic beer. You really have to try and get your hands on some.
I'll make the beer listeners jealous by sharing with you that I've actually got one in my fridge.
I've got 3.
On your recommendation. On your recommendation.
Good.
So I guess it's time to turn our attention back to our show topic.
Yeah, we should hop to it.
Oh. Sometimes when I ask people if they can name the main ingredients of beer, they seem to think that it's mostly made of hops rather than flavoured with hops.
So let's really get back to basics here then, because I think it's easy to forget that not everyone knows how beer is made and what each ingredient brings to the brew.
You're very right. So hops are essentially used like herbs are used in cooking. And if you imagine a bouquet garni, which is like a little bag of herbs that you shove into your saucepan and then you remove at the end of cooking before you serve the meal, or if you think of a bay leaf, something that flavours what you're making but doesn't end up on your plate. That is how hops are used in brewing. They give their flavour and aroma, but the hops themselves are fished out before you drink the beer.
And the other thing they do is act as a preservative, which, especially in the case of cask ale, is very, very important because it's a living, breathing product. The hops prevent bacterial growth and things and other mold and funguses then growing in there, but do allow yeast to act on it. So it's the hop oils themselves, the alpha acids in there, which give both bitterness and act as this preserving agent.
They act as an antiseptic almost, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
So, and it's probably one of the main reasons that hops became the flavouring for beer is that preservative quality that the oils bring, because they helped it keep for longer, which is, as Sam's just said, now in cask ale, because it's a fresh product, and once it's open, you've got to drink it up quick, but the hops will give it a bit of extra life. It's probably one of the main reasons that hops became the flavouring for beer, though, that antiseptic quality, that preservative quality, because they helped it keep for longer. We still need that in beer today, particularly cask beer. But before there was refrigeration and pasteurisation and filtration and all these kind of things that happen to beer to help it keep for longer, hops could magically do that. Probably seemed magic. But before that, beer was flavoured with mixtures of herbs, which usually were known as gruit. And apparently gruit was traditionally made up of yarrow, rosemary and bog myrtle. Good old bog myrtle. And I think if you want to get, because maybe that sounds weird, but if you want to get an idea of what beer might have been like before hops, then you should get hold of some of the Williams brothers, I believe it's pronounced Frauch.
Okay.
Get hold of some of that. It looks like it's spelled Fraoch, so it looks like Frauch, and I'd been calling it that for years, but then I was told that it wasn't Frauch, it was Frauch or Frauch. But that doesn't have any hops in. It's flavoured with bog myrtle and with heather flowers, and it's a really classic example of a beer that is hopless. So get hold of some of that if you want to know what beer tasted like back in the day, before about the 1500s, when hopping became popular in this country, although hops were banned by Henry VIII. Do you know why he banned them?
Well, I do know, and I can't quite believe this. But go on.
Good old Henry VIII, obviously known for being this very chaste king, he thought that they were aphrodisiac and that they might lead his subjects into sinful behaviour.
He wanted to keep them all for himself. That's probably
That's probably it. So he banned them. There used to be a difference between beer and ale, because ale was a drink that didn't have hops in, was probably flavoured with gruit or other herb mixtures, and beer was the hopped stuff.
But let's go back to these alpha acids and bitterness levels. There are some hops with very high levels of alpha acids, and they're often used as bittering hops, so they go in at the beginning of the boil. And other hops are more well known for their kind of floral or fruity character, and they're really known as aroma hops, and they go in towards the end because you don't want to boil off all of the aromatic compounds. We actually know of over 300 different chemicals in hops which add to flavour and aroma. There are some more well-known ones which give flavours of pine or grapefruit and citrus and things like that. But you can get some which give some very, very odd characters. And it's the different levels of these aroma compounds which give the different characteristics of the different hop varieties. And brewers can use those to their advantage to craft very interesting flavours.
So a little of the science of hops is useful to understanding how the different varieties taste and can bring different flavours to beer. And the oils, and I'm not going to use lots of technical terminology, partly because I usually get confused with the different terms. But it's if you ever have seen a hop, they're very small. They look like a little cone. They're sometimes called hop cones, but they're flower heads, and it's the female plants that have the flower heads growing on them. And if you pluck a hop off a hop bine, and we call it a bine rather than a vine, and if you break it open, at the bottom of the flower there are all these little tiny sacs, little yellow sacs of oil, and they're called lupulin glands. And that's what hops are all about, really. That's where all the oils reside, and that's where these alpha acids that we've been talking about come from. And the more that's in there, probably the higher the alpha acid of the hop is, and the more bitter it might be, or the more powerful flavour it might bring to the beer. And there's a formula for measuring it, and also hops are measured. Each crop is measured, so that, because it can vary a bit from year to year. But that's how hops are labelled up, so brewers can tell what kind of bitterness level they'll be getting in their beer, and they're categorised under flavours. So as Sam was saying, it's some taste of grapefruit, some might taste of melon, some might taste of lychees. They tend to be the hops from overseas, and British hops tend to be more earthy and traditionally sort of bitter. But you've got all these different varieties, just all these with incredible names. I like Fuggles and Goldings, and Pilot and various other names. Which usually have a story behind them as well. And then brewers choose them like picking ingredients to make a dish, like picking herbs. If you were making a certain pasta dish, and you might think, oh well, basil would work really well with this, or you were picking something else, you're cooking some fish and you decide to have some tarragon because you think that flavour will work better with the fish that you're cooking. And brewers choose hops in the same way that cooks choose herbs to flavour dishes.
That's right. And the interesting thing about hops from different countries is that the different climates and the different terroir, to use a wine term, give different characteristics in flavour. So you can take an American style hop and plant it in this country, and you'd get a very different flavour profile from it than you would in America, and the same with the New Zealand hops.
So the climate we have here in the UK is what they call a maritime climate. And that means we've got warm but not really hot summers, and cool but not really cold winters. And we've got a certain soil type that produces hops that are very earthy. And as you say, if you take a hop called Cascade, which, if you like those kind of American style IPAs and pale ales, you probably will have come across, because it's one of the ones that tastes very grapefruity and zesty. We grow Cascade here in the UK, but it doesn't taste quite the same or come out quite the same as the Cascade that's grown in the United States. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the differences between what sort of hops we've got growing here and what sort of hops grow elsewhere. But that terroir is very important, because grapes are taken very seriously where grapes are grown. Different wines from California, wines from France, Italian wines, they're all very different products. And in the same way, hops from different countries produce very different flavours in beers. I think we've talked enough, and we need to open a beer, don't we?
Yes. Yes, we do.
So we are going to have, first of all, the British beer. What British beer are we going to be having, Sam?
It's Adnams Broadside, and this is a great example of what British hops, or traditional British hops, can add to a beer, or at least we hope it is. It's a very
It
classy
is.
bottle. This Adnams bottle, isn't it? I love the shape of it.
Yeah, it is. And it's it's named Broadside because it's commemorating the Battle of Sole Bay, and it's got some pictures of ships on there and ships in battle. And I'm just going to dive in because I Broadside is one of my favourite beers actually, but I've lost my bottle opener, so you'll probably be here. It is in there before I am. Now I've served this relatively cool, and actually probably it's might be a bit too cool, but hopefully we'll get away with it.
Mine's room temperature, so
Mine's mine's a tad cool, and it's been out of the fridge for a while, and I've put a massive grey head on, but that's probably good because
you get more of those hop aromas out that way.
yes, exactly.
It's a deep ruby, almost brown colour.
It is. If you hold it up to the light, it is very ruby, but if you're not holding it to the light, it just looks like a sort of a chestnutty brown. And the head on mine is lovely, lovely foamy, almost looks like beaten egg white, but a little bit darker in colour than that.
I should warn you, if you've had this on cask, this in bottle it's a little bit stronger. It's I think in cask it's 5.5, in bottle it's 6.3. But it's definitely a Christmas winter beer, I think.
It is. It's actually, I think, only about 4.3 in cask, and they are two different beers with very similar recipes and the same hops, I believe. But they are two different beers. But I have to say, I think the bottled one has the edge and is the one that I've loved for a long time. So having a little bit of a smell here. It's very spicy. I might have been led by the fact that you've mentioned the C word already.
Sorry about that.
I mean Christmas. But it's earthy, it's spicy, it's like those sort of mixtures of spices that you might get in a Christmas cake.
But with maybe some peel as well.
Yes, with like orange peel, and that is coming undoubtedly from the hop which is used in this beer, which is First Gold, which is a traditional British hop.
And I think it's used to great effect here. You've got the rich, almost fruity malt in there, and then this lovely kind of orange peel bitterness coming through. It's not strong bitterness, but it's just enough to round the beer off.
And I think the thing is, that's what you've just said there is not strong bitterness. It's very noticeable bitterness because it gives that dry finish to the beer that makes you really smack your lips and want to drink more. And that's what British hops can do.
Yeah.
And when I were a lass, as they say, as I say, I used to drink pints of bitter. That was the first beer that I drank, and Broadside reminds me of those bitters that I used to drink because it has that earthy, almost mineral bitterness that just makes you want to drink more.
Yeah. And actually the bitterness is more there afterwards, like you said. It builds after a couple of sips. It's definitely not, though, the main point of this beer. The point of this beer is that malt backbone, the really fruity malt, and the kind of orangey notes dancing over the top of it.
And the First Gold hop is said to have characters that are orange and marmalade and spicy, and I think that's what you're getting from this beer. I think you at 6.3% you do get a bit of that sort of warming alcohol from it, and like you say, it is a very sort of wintry beer.
Having said that, though, I wouldn't call it heavy.
No.
I mean, maybe because I'm used to some imperial stouts or something, but it's light enough to easily enjoy a pint or a couple of pints.
While we're on air, beer listeners, I'm just taking a snap of this wonderful beer for the show notes, so you can see what it looks like and see the bottle. But many of you will probably be familiar with this beer anyway. and it's easy to get in the supermarket. Almost any supermarket will have Adnams Broadside. It's 6.3%, and it is a real classic, strong English bitter. And the show's over now because I want to just sit back and drink the rest of it.
Come on, we've got a very special beer to come yet, so...
We have, but I still want to drink the rest of this one.
Fair enough.
So, I think we've got Broadside, traditional bitter brewed by Adnams from the Suffolk coast with a British hop variety in. And we were talking a little bit when we were trying to sort of do our best to explain hops, about the differences between hops grown here in the UK and hops grown in the United States, and also hops grown in the Southern Hemisphere. And although the weather is different and the soil is different, hops are all grown on the same point of latitude, the two numbers of which now escape me, but they're all grown at the same latitude wherever they're grown in the world.
We'll put a nice map on the show notes, I think.
That's a really good idea. I'll get away with my shoddy memory that way. And we're going to hear in a moment from Alison Capper of the British Hop Association, who is a really good advocate, one of the best advocates we've got for British hops, because the British hop industry used to grow something like 72,000 acres of hops at its sort of peak in the sort of 1870s, and today we only grow around 2,500 acres of hops. And some will tell you that the British hop industry is beleaguered, if you like. Many would argue against that. We still have a very strong industry, but you've got two challenges that are going on. One is the popularity of these big flavour hops from the United States and the Southern Hemisphere. The other is hop farmers are getting older, and it's, you know, who's going to take over once those hop farmers are around no longer? So you've got a challenge there. But hopefully something that's happening that will take on both of those challenges is the work that's going on to develop new varieties. And there's a chap who is probably our foremost expert on British hops, is Dr. Peter Darby, and we don't have him on the show today, unfortunately, but we'll hear from Ali, who'll talk a little bit about the issues. But Dr. Darby does lots of work in developing new varieties and rediscovering old varieties of hops, and one of the ones that's come out of this has a really inauspicious name. It's called OZ97A.
That's catchy. I can see that being on the label of next year's triple hop from Duvel on the label.
The names actually come from the plots where they're grown, and they're just given numbers, and in time it probably will be given a name. Now, I was very lucky to be able to try a trial brew that was made with that hop, grown here in the UK, and it tastes and smells like mango sorbet.
Wow.
And you would not believe it was a British hop, but it is.
That sounds fantastic.
And it was amazing. And then that was grown in Kent, under the Y Hops, which is the kind of research arm of the British Hop Association. And then in Herefordshire and Worcester, you've got a hop merchants called Charles Fareham, and they're also doing hop development work to try and challenge the supremacy of these big flavour varieties from the United States and the Southern Hemisphere. And they've come up with something called Jester. Have you heard of that, Sam?
I have, yeah.
And it was it's in commercial production now. I think the crop that came out this year, they didn't get as good a yield as they were hoping for, but more brewers will have the chance to brew with it. And again, it had a very incredible zesty grapefruit flavour. It was brewed with by More Beer from Somerset. They brewed a beer, an IPA, which they called the Empire Strikes Back.
Nice.
And it does. Look out, America, because the British are coming. It had flavours in it that you wouldn't expect. Sam, talk us through the fashion of big flavour hops from the USA, from New Zealand, from Australia. Tell us about some of the beers that use these hops, and what flavours and why people like them so much.
Well, I think what's really interesting about these new British hops anyway is that possibly we could have been growing hops with these flavours for a long time. It's just the fashion of the trend and what people actually like to drink in this country traditionally wasn't for these big flavours. It was for more subtle, herbal, earthy notes. And so the hop varieties were designed to give those flavours rather than the big fruit flavours. But what happened in America in the 80s and then the 90s and was that in response to the big multinational lager makers, sort of Budweiser and things like that, the smaller breweries or the new breweries looked to replicate British styles but with their own hops, and they did it to the extreme. And I'm not just talking about extreme brewing here, but they emphasised the flavour of the hops, and these hops had all these fruity flavours that we didn't get traditionally in the UK, and so the more popular these beers became, the more demand there was for them and for new hop varieties with different fruity flavours. And then it came over to the UK. So what it means is that newer brewers who are taking influence from America are demanding these flavours, and the only place they can get them up until recently was from American and then New Zealand hops. So I think it's really great that the British hop farmers or the British Hop Association are really pushing these new varieties which can have the flavours which we associate with American hops in order to make our own styles of beer. We don't have to call them American pale ales. They're British pale ales with British hops, but just, turned up a little bit. And that's brilliant.
So let's hear a little word from Alison Capper from the British Hop Association, and just hear what she's got to say about British hops, about her calling for brewers to, British brewers to use them, and just for the fact that British hops they're not in any way, shape or form over or yesterday's news. And they might indeed be the future of beer. So we'll hear now from her.
I'm not going to go Jeremy Paxman on you, but I'm sort of playing devil's advocate a little bit. You do amazing work, and obviously you are this this campaigner for British hops and saving British hops, and getting brewers to understand that British hops can do so much. But you cannot control people's tastes and what they want. So how much of a challenge is it if the fashion for American hops or overseas hops of any kind, but particularly those that produce those different flavours, how much of a challenge is that for the British hop industry?
I'm going to play devil's advocate now, because the reason why I'm very excited is that when I go and stand in America and talk to brewers, what they recognise they desperately need is something in their beer repertoire that complements their highly hopped, very high intense aroma beers. Why do they need something to complement it, firstly? Because commercially, those beers are limited. Why are those beers limited? Those beers are limited because they have such a highly hopped, bitter characteristic that they strip the palate, so people can only drink 1 or 2 glasses. That's not great for business. What they need to complement those beers in their portfolio are balanced beers that people can drink more than 1 glass of. They call them session beers, and that's where British hops are really exciting American brewers. So I suspect that we are going to see things come full circle, because all these things are cyclical. British brewers are very excited about what's coming from America, highly hopped, intense aroma, flavour beers. I think the next wave that's going to come from America will be balanced session beers using British hops, which is just ironic, isn't it? So I think that's the answer to your question. I think British hops have a place in the portfolio
alongside.
Alongside, and I think we'll see the flavour profile thing was going to move on. We've already seen a bit of a toe in the water with fruit beers, and that hasn't been a huge success. But, we've seen that toe in the water. I'm sure we will see lots of other experiments with flavour going on. But a successful brewery is about a portfolio of beers that appeals to the widest possible range of beer drinkers, and that people can keep coming back to, keep buying more of. Repeat purchase is very important. So whether that's more than one glass or more than one bottle or buying week after week, repeat purchase is a very broad brush definition. But they need a portfolio that will appeal to the broadest customer base possible. And British hops definitely have a role to play in that portfolio. And when you talk to American brewers, they're desperate for balanced beers, balanced, drinkable beers. And British hops, the delicate, complex aromas of British hops deliver that drinkability more than any other hop anywhere else in the world.
So that was Ali Capper of the British Hop Association. She's also a hop farmer, and she farms in Worcestershire. So she knows her stuff. She's she's very passionate, and she's passionate because it's her livelihood, as well as being passionate about British hops and what they can do. And there are various events going on in the as part of the beer revolution, if you like, that we're living through. And one of those is, and some of those are looking to promote British hops as well. And Sam, you can tell us a little bit about that, I think, can't you?
I can. Well, back in September, I went to the Kent Green Hop Beer launch, which was at the Canterbury Food and Drink Festival. And the Kent Green Hop Beer campaign, if you like, is a really good one to really push British hops. And what they do is they get all of the Kent breweries together to brew special beers, special one-off beers with green hops, which from Kent, all at the same time. Green hops are literally hops straight off the vine, so they've not been dried or prepared in any way. You have to treat them slightly differently when you brew with them, but what they also do is they really highlight the character of the hops in a different way to dried hops. So I tasted a few of these beers, and this is what I thought of them.
Okay, so as you've just been hearing, we managed to escape from the studio prior to recording the actual show, and we are at Canterbury Food and Drink Festival, which is in Dane John Garden in Canterbury, and we're going to taste some of the green hop beers, or rather Sam is. I'm not going to talk to you about it because I do the PR for Kent Green Hop Beer Fortnight, and it seems a little bit naughty to come along and advertise it to you or something. So, Sam, what are we starting with?
This is the Capel Pale Ale from Tunbridge Brewery. It's a beautiful kind of amber colour. And what did you get on the nose, Soph? I'm getting peach tea. Kind of berries of some kinds.
So Sam is asking me what's on the nose because he has got a bit of a cold, and he has actually thrown some grass in my sample, so hopefully that doesn't contaminate it too much, and I'm just going to have a little sniff. But this is really all I'm going to be doing. He's going to be telling you about the beers. I get quite a minerally kind of aroma off that, and I think your nose is doing a lot better than you think it is. So why don't you dive in and have a taste and tell us what it's like?
That's really nice. It's a solid pale ale. I'm afraid, listeners, I do have a cold, so some of the subtler flavours here might be escaping me. You can really taste the green hop kind of character there. It's strange that I think green hops give a more slightly resinous note to the beer and a kind of a fresh flavour, which only really works, I guess, in fresh cask ale in this way. But no, it's a really delicious beer. It's got a kind of a really powerful bitterness. Of course, bitterness being one of the main flavours I can taste through my cold at the moment.
And what? Just remind us what variety of hop is in this one, because it's many of them are East Kent Goldings, because obviously it's a Kent event and people like to use their local hop. But this one has got, is it?
This is Pilgrim, which I don't think I've actually known that I've tasted before. I don't really know much about this hop, apart from obviously it's British. But if it's giving the kind of citrusy bitterness to the beer, which I think is very, very tasty and very Moorish.
So we'll move on to another beer now, and I'm going to rush Sam through them all because I want to be able to drink some and I'm not allowed to talk about it. So the next beer that we're going to do, we're just going to do 2 beers. There's actually been more than 30 Kent green hop beers this year, and so we could easily dedicate a whole show to them, but we won't. The next beer that we've got is from Want Some Brewery, and they did a number of green hop beers, and there's a nice black cat there wearing a green hop collar. How lovely, having a stretch. Sorry, we got distracted by the lovely cat there. The next beer we've got is Want Some Brewery, and they've done some single hop varieties, and the one that we've got to try is Bramling Cross, and it's a best bitter. So Sam, what are you getting from this one?
Well, on the nose, and I'm really getting the blackcurrant actually. It's not something I've really got before with Bramling Cross, but it's definitely a kind of a blackcurranty aroma, which I think is really nice. I think what's interesting is these green hops are really showing the kind of fruity character as well, which the hops are known for, which in the UK anyway, the British hops, it's sometimes less apparent, but with the green hops it really comes through nicely. It's an interesting best bitter actually. It's got what I really like about it is the hop character is quite strong there, but it's also got the kind of best bitter malt character, British malt character that we all love. One thing I would also say is that all these beers are in great condition. They've got great carbonation, nice prickly carbonation from the cask conditioning, and they're all very, very clear. But this is especially good actually. I think this kind of almost rivals the Capel Pale Ale actually for the quality. Yeah, no, I'm very impressed.
I didn't pay him to say that. It's his own personal opinion. So there we have it, a couple of tastings of Kent green hop beers using 2 different hops, one with Pilgrim, one with Bramling Cross, and recorded as live at Kent Green Hop Beer Fortnight's launch at Canterbury Food and Drink Festival, and now you'll be hearing from us back in their respective studios. The seasons have very much moved on from Kent green hop beer season and us standing out there in the Dane John Gardens in Canterbury, and I have to say I'm very lucky to work with those brewers in Kent that that make those green hop beers, and the passion, the excitement amongst the brewers to be championing the hops that grow literally on their doorsteps is just it feels so good to work with them.
And it's such a great event. You can really feel the energy there as well. And as I've said before, it's when groups of people get together to champion a cause in that way, the energy which they have really comes across. And I have to say that they're some of the best cask ales I've had in a long, long time.
And as I say, I hold up my hands. I do the PR for it, but I try to taste the beers with, objectively, as objectively as I can. But there were some real stunning brews that came out of it, and it was an incredible year. And we had, the first year that we did the fortnight, there was something like 20 just over 20 beers that were brewed, but we had more than 30 this year, and the enthusiasm for it, and with new breweries who've started up wanting to be involved, but also with older Kent breweries who weren't involved initially but really wanted to get involved. It's very exciting. So Kent Green Hop Beer Fortnight takes place from late September through to October. So you've missed it this year if you're listening to this programme as a kind of new programme, but if you're listening to it later in 2014, look out for details of Kent Green Hop Beer Fortnight, which we'll put some details on the show notes of that and a link to the website.
Okay, you're listening to the Beer Talkers podcast, and this month we're talking hops. But before we carry on, we should tell you how you can get in touch with us.
Yes, because you can tweet us at the Beer Talkers.
And if you've not come to us via the website, you can find show notes and including details and pictures of the beers we've tasted on this edition of the programme by visiting www.thebeertalkers.com.
Okay, so we're talking hops. They are, if you've never been to a hop farm, I recommend taking a trip to one because it's an incredible experience, because hops are basically climbing plants that climb a little bit like runner beans climb, but in the opposite direction, if I remember correctly. And they climb very high. They must grow to sort of 20 or 30 feet. And if you get to go to a hop farm and walk up and down the rows of hops, you're dwarfed by these incredible plants. And you should take care as well, because they've got these very tiny little sort of almost invisible spines on the bines. And if you ever get involved in helping to harvest them, they can lacerate you in an instant if you're not careful. I wasn't warned to wear long sleeves on my trip, and I ended up, it looked like somebody had taken a razor blade to my arms.
Yeah, it's not nice.
It's not nice, but they're incredible, and they're perennial plants, and they basically grow from a root system called rhizomes, and they come back up every year and they just regrow, and then they're ready to harvest around late August and September. And normally they are picked and they go into kilns. It used to be into oast houses, where they're dried out and preserved for future use. And as Sam was mentioning when he was talking about Kent Green Hop Beer Fortnight, if you use green hops or fresh hops, you pick them, but you have to get them into the beer very quickly in less than 24 hours, in fact less than 12 hours in Kent, because they can start going mouldy if you don't either dry them or brew with them straight away. Then your hops can go to waste. But they're incredible plants, and it's the female plant that grows the flowers or hop cones, and the male plants, they're just leafy. They don't do much.
Yeah, you had to bring that into it, didn't you?
So, and we've been talking about the battle, if you like, between British hops and hops from overseas, and that's not to discount the incredible varieties of hops that are grown in Europe, in Germany, in the Czech Republic, which, the flavours of which will be familiar to many of you in like the Saaz hop from the Czech Republic. You'll find that in many, many Pilsners. And if you love German beers, there are plenty of German hops that you might be familiar with. I've got like some kind of little beer flies trying to attack me here in my studio. That's why I'm waving, Sam.
That's what they are. They're beer flies, aren't they? They're not fruit flies. They're beer flies.
They are at the moment. So we've been talking about the differences in flavours and the fashions, and we're going to have another beer now, aren't we, Sam?
We are. And this is a true classic. Some say it was the original craft beer. There's one thing for sure, it's probably the original American Pale Ale. It's also available in the supermarket, which is fantastic, and it's Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
And it's a lovely bottle. It's a smaller bottle than the Adnams. The Adnams comes in a 500ml size, and this comes in a 350ml size, which is the Americans tend to do a little bit more. Should we open this up? It's got a lovely green label then with the yellow Sierra Nevada branding on it.
Now be careful of that sediment at the bottom. This is a bottle conditioned ale.
Thank you for reminding me.
And when people think of pale ales, they often think of what we would actually might call blonde ales. So this pale ale is actually kind of an orange, a pale orange colour rather than completely clear yellow.
Yes, it's quite dark, isn't it? And it's got poured with a lovely head. We will take photos of this and put them on the show notes so you can see what it looks like. But it looks a lovely beer. I think, people do. Maybe I'm being too negative, but I like to look at my beer because I think beer looks lovely. If it's in a nice glass, I've got this in a nice stemmed glass. And again, it's got a nice sort of foamy, pillowy head. Get a nose full of that.
Yeah, it's pretty special. The hops are fresh and piney, and I think it's Cascade hops in this, and it's a kind of a showcase for the Cascade hop.
I get a lychees from this.
But the other thing you can taste in this, which is maybe not so typical of modern American pale ales, is you can really smell the malt coming through as well.
Yeah, it's got you get that in the aroma, do you?
A touch.
A touch.
Maybe I have a different batch to you.
Yeah, well, you do. I mean, you've bought it in a different end of the country. I bought mine in Tesco's this time. They sell it in Tesco's. They sell it in Morrison's. Sierra Nevada take the transportation of their beer very, very seriously in terms of, I think, things like refrigerated lorries and God knows what else. They're very careful about the quality.
And rightly so.
Indeed. I get a sort of I get the hops, which I get the lychee character, and then I get a sort of a barley sugar from the nose as well.
Yeah.
A sort of sweetness, which I think is the malty character that you're referring to. It smells so different to the Broadside, so fruity, whereas the Broadside with the British hops in was much more spicy. And to drink it,
well, it's all about the hops, isn't it?
It is all about the hops. It's bitter, but it's bitter in a tropical, fruity way. Don't laugh.
Well, all those bitter tropical fruits I'm thinking of right now.
And he's only being so rude to me, beer listeners, because I can't slap him over Skype. I'm going to take a picture of the beer so that you can see it.
But you really should go to the supermarket and get 4 bottles of this, put them in the fridge, and taste them over the course of a few days or whenever you like, because it surprises people, and there's still a feeling around American beer in this country where people just think of Budweiser, and it's so far from the truth.
Yeah.
As far as quality is concerned, and this Sierra Nevada Pale Ale is the beer to convert people.
I think I touched on this. I did some a different kind of beer talking recently on a local BBC station, and somebody said, I think that was a bottle cap in the background there. I can't remember whether it was off air or on air. The guy who was presenting it said to me, the Americans made that sort of comment that, American beer, it's just lager, isn't it? And I remember actually also just a few years ago being in Brooklyn. I went to Brooklyn to see a band, as you do, just down the road. And I thought, I can't wait to try some American beer. And I didn't fully appreciate actually the level of the kind of craft beer movement in the States then. And I remember one of my friends being very disparaging, going, well, you won't find much, it's crap. And actually the venue where this gig was on had some Sierra Nevada Summerfest, which is a kind of Pilsner, I believe, that they make. And it was just, really full of American hop flavors, but not, very fruity, not very bitter, but very refreshing and very much like its name. And I put away a few pints of that. It was very nice indeed. And I think if people can understand a little bit more about the American hops and the flavors that are in them, it might help put that sort of attitude that still exists in some quarters to bed.
Definitely. Yeah, and it does make me wonder in a way, though, what was the American hop industry like before Sierra Nevada and the other breweries who were doing the same thing around the same time existed? Because it must have been just making the same hop for the same massive brewing corporations.
We probably could almost do another whole program investigating that, and maybe one day we will, but not today. So I'm chilled now. I've had some Broadside, I've had some Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, enjoying the different hop characters that each has. And just thinking, what do you think, Sam? Would it make a difference if, as Ali Kappa would like to see, more brewers put the name of the hop variety on their beers, on their beer labelling?
Well, I think that's a very interesting point, and I think it certainly didn't hurt the wine industry to do the same thing, especially with wines coming from the New World, where they didn't have the ability to put on Bordeaux or Burgundy or things like that. So to educate the consumer is cannot be a bad thing. Having said that, we're in a weird situation at the moment where amongst certain people, amongst certain breweries, the word Fuggles is the F word they dare not utter. So I Fuggles being a British hop, by the way, beer listeners. So it's kind of, I really like the idea of having these new hops coming through that are very exciting British hops that people can use to make interestingly flavoured beers. But at the same time, I think our beer heritage is such that we need to celebrate the traditional hop varieties, East Kent Goldings, Fuggles, because they have their own special qualities to offer, and there's certainly nothing wrong with a traditional British pint.
And indeed, the East Kent Goldings hop has been given the PDO status by the EU, the protected origin status. So you can only call East Kent Goldings. You can only call it that if they're actually grown in East Kent now.
I didn't know that. That's brilliant.
First hop to have received that designation, which hopefully sort of bodes well for hops being, taken more seriously. And I think it's a shame, I know you're right about, Fuggles being the F word that some brewers don't want to mention. But as Ali was saying, there's a time and a place where you want the flavour, the level of flavour in a beer to be less strong, so that you can have a few pints, because that's what's great about beer. It's, if you go for a session beer, it's, going towards 4% or just over 4%. You're out with your friends, it's after work, it's the end of a week. You can have a few pints, and it's not the kind of alcoholic beverage that actually then turns you into some kind of monster. And British hops are good at making that kind of beer. And I think we've got to, what is needed is a point where the big flavour hops, be they these new varieties grown here in the UK or the imports, those big flavours can sit alongside the traditional sort of earthy flavours, and because that's what beer's about. Beer is about variety of flavour and variety of styles, so you need different hops that can work in different ways.
Indeed. So I think we've covered hops pretty well today. We've tasted a classic British bitter flavoured with classic British hops.
And we've tasted a classic American pale ale from Sierra Nevada with American hop.
We've gone into the politics and the science behind the different hop varieties from around the world, and there's certainly we could have gone into a lot more detail there, because it's a fascinating world with lots to investigate.
And as Sam said, there's a wealth of information out there on hops, and much more depth to the subject than we've been able to cover in one podcast. So we will see if we can find a few resources to pop on the show notes for you in case you're interested to learn a little more about hops. But we hope that we've whet your appetite for them. So we've been the Beer Talkers.
Thanks for being the beer listeners. Goodbye.
Goodbye.